On April 17, 2005, the state chapter in New Jersey celebrated its fifth class to be honored by the National Wrestling Hall of Fame with a Lifetime Service to Wrestling Award presented to Coach John M. Allen. Coach Allen began his lifetime commitment to wrestling some 50 years ago at St. Benedict's Prep School. Coach Allen coached 30 individual champions and 7 national prep champions, the foremost being Mike Caruso, who recorded an 81 wins to 0 loss high school record before earning 3 NCAA championships at Lehigh University. John is an exceptional individual. He has devoted his life in working with young people through athletics, teaching the skills and attitudes fundamental for success in sports, but more importantly, teaching his wrestlers how to win with humility and lose with grace and dignity. Coach Allen has always enjoyed the reputation of being a gentleman coach who brought credit to his profession, teams, schools, community, and family. And now, here is Coach Allen, who will instruct us on skills.
Different direction. If you have crab ride and you care to get the opponent on his back, one way you could possibly get him on his back is use tight bar and waist strap, and you elevate him off to the side, and as he rotates the base, you try to keep his head down, you reach in and get a one-on-one, a wrist bar, and then run the head with the tight bar action. That is your circle toward the head. Second, pin grip from crab ride is wrist bar in half. You get a one-on-one and a half Nelson, elevate him off to the side, post your head so you can step to the other side, and get your chest low so you can get chest on chest, and ease him over onto his back, keeping the wrist bar in half to finalize the pin. A third method is if you happen to pull opponent back into a crab ride, and he posts his 2 hands to keep from going back, what you can do is double underhook his arms at the elbow area, at the elbows area, and elevate him off to the side, high, trying to get him in a stacked position, and then you put him in what we call a screamer, which is simply a double underhook trap of his arms behind his back. Getting him into that same grip via the wrist bar in half is sometimes possible if you apply wrist bar in half and elevate him off to one side, and he grabs your upper arm and it begins to slip your half Nelson. He's going to try to slip it. What you can do perhaps is elevate him diagonally across your body and change to a screamer grip on the other side. You do a double underhook, elevate him up into a stacked position, sit through, and with that double underhook you trap his arms and ease him down for near fall points at least, and a pin pull through. I'm going to take a moment here to define our various wrist controls by name. If opponent, the bottom man, reaches in and grabs your wrist, and you reach in from the top underneath his body, as top man, you reach underneath his body and grab his wrist, we call that counter wrist grip. It's counter wrist grip. He grabs, you grab. If he grabs, you grab. That's counter wrist grip. Another wrist control would be what we call reach around wrist grip. RAWG, R-A-W-G, reach around wrist grip. You just sweep his near arm in on an angle, diagonally inward, under him, and with your waist strap arm, you grab his wrist. That we term reach around wrist grip. It's a great lead up to pin grips. And then from there, you can get a third wrist grip, which we call fish hook. You circle his butt, reach in from rear crotch, and get a hold of his wrist, and you have what we call fish hook grip. And then 2 other basic grips are one-on-one wrist bar, W bar, that's a one-on-one, and wrist back. On wrist back, generally we have the head in the armpit, and we put the head in and drive a little with the head and pull back on the wrist, and we have what we call wrist back, W back grip. Those are our basic wrist grips from the top position, from the riding position. All right, some thoughts on some of the things you have to watch out for when you're riding. For example, an elevator. Anticipate a possible elevator anytime opponent's falling, whether you're riding him or otherwise. If he's falling and you're in such a relative position that he could apply an elevator, you have to be alert. And you have to remember that an opponent does not have to fall from high up to create enough leverage for an effective elevator. Particularly stay alert while riding for a possible L anytime you chop using waist and arm ride. And when that happens, he could apply an elevator. If he's going for a switch and you reach up in there to chop to stop that switch, he could hit elevator, take you off your base. So, to avoid or prevent such an elevator, what you want to do is sort of sidestep his foot with your knee, step around it that is, and then fuse your knee to his butt. Once you get your knee in tight to his butt, he cannot slip his instep inside your knee to execute the elevator. If elevator is imminent or has been initiated, don't put your head down, raise it up. Don't tighten up, relax your body, make yourself heavy, and post the hand so that you don't lose your balance. And then try to step around, if possible, into opponent to overpower his elevator action. So it's head up, relaxed body, post hand, and circle laterally, move into opponent to overpower his element. All right, versus flip. If opponent is going to execute flip action, you want to cover a leg or both legs. You have to, of course, watch out for a quick elevator if you cover both legs. You want to cover a leg or both legs, and you want to control his hips. You want to have enough pressure downward on his hips that it's hard for him to get his hips up over his head. If opponent is going to succeed on a flip, he's cleared his legs and he's going into the flip, then you can do what we call reverse drag action. Just circle the other way. A little bit of drag action on his arm. That drag action is simply downward, arcing downward pressure on his arm. One more time against the flip. We go the opposite direction. He flips, we circle the opposite way, put a little pressure on the arm so he can't stop us from going behind. So, I'm going to show some moves against high leg over. When you're riding an opponent, he could possibly get into a position where he would be applying high leg over. If we have drag bypass position, somehow in the course of riding him, we eventuated into this position, or maybe it was in the process of reversing him, and we're about to get into a ride position, into control position. To prevent high leg over, the instep that is behind his far knee presses forward. And as he tries to do high leg over, the pressure behind that knee prevents that high leg over. However, if he's very forceful, or we're not very alert, or it's a combination thereof, we didn't have enough pressure behind that knee and his high leg over might be successful, that's when you can reach up from the hamstring to the waist strap position and slide your hips away a few inches and rotate his hips so that he comes down into your lap and you sit him into a crab ride position. So against high leg over, we can use foot pressure, or we can change off perhaps to a crab ride. Also, if opponent happened to be using whizzer as an escape, and he's drilling us, and he puts us down on our hip, and then he posts his hand, and he's going to do, or at least plans to do, high leg over cradle. As he starts into the high leg over, you bring your lower leg's instep up over his leg, and you go with him. As you go with him, you kind of elevate his leg, and then come up through rear crotch, and you'll get control position. All right, versus high turning. Some thoughts against high turning. One, if he's in a sit position, you should be behind both arms. And if you can get counter wrist grip, and the man wants to go down to one side into the high turning action, what you can do is pressure to the other side to prevent him from going to the side he cares to. And even if he were to go down into high turning position, he had a lot of force, your being behind the arm and having a deep grip on his wrist, that is a good grip on his wrist, you'd be able to slow down and control his high turn in action and probably be able to stay with him and control him. If high turning is in progress, you might be able to do a modified reverse drag, that is simply go the other way and come in behind him. If opponent does a high turn in but fails to get his hand back alongside his hip or doesn't get it there quickly, you might be able to circle and hook his leg. Once you hook the leg, the high turn in is ineffective. If opponent does a high turn in and you're behind both arms, but you're not deep behind on the near side, and you get that position where you can't move, hand behind the arm, you're caught out in front. You're out to the front. He can't face you. You don't want to go behind him on the side you're on because he's liable to do wrist leg roll. You're kind of caught out there in no man's land, and you want to retain control. You can post your head and do a cartwheel to get to the other side, and it'll put you in a more comfortable riding position. You'll be back in control. If he does a high turning, and you need it as a last resort, you move toward the front as if to try to give opponent a neutral, and when he comes back toward his base to do duck under action, you can wing him and step over him. It's a last resort, and if you catch him with it, you'll put him in reverse Nelson crotch pin grip. So 4 or 5 thoughts, I guess they total to. 1, you want to get behind that near arm and get counter wrist grip. 2, if the high turning is in progress, you might be able to do reverse drag type action. That is, simply go the other way. 3, you might be able to circle and hook his leg to prevent the high turning from being effective. You could render it ineffective that way. 4, if you're caught in a position where you feel uncomfortable, you're behind his 2 arms, but you can't get behind him, he can't get you, what you can do is post your head into a cartwheel to get to a better control position. And then lastly, as a last resort, if the opponent is forced into duck under type action to come in behind you, what you can do is a wing and step over and try to catch him off guard, put him on his back. All right, versus sit out in general. Some thoughts. Number 1, we tend to get behind, that is under and inside, opponent's arms. Anytime he goes toward a sit pose of any sort, automatically, our basic rule is you get behind his arms, because it will enable you to stay behind him if he does any sort of a turn in or out. And if he happens to grab a wrist, tend immediately to secure counter wrist grip. Counter wrist grip is worth having when an opponent has a wrist because you can better control him. You can slow down his movements, control him, use crab ride, whatever you need to use in order to maintain your top position. To prevent a sit out, some thoughts about pre-acting. What you can do is grab an ankle or hook a leg. If you hook a leg or grab an ankle, it prevents the opponent from getting into a sit position. He can't sit out, he can't sit back. If opponent is going to go into a sit position and you know it's coming, and he's not a wrist grab type person, you can circle to the side and apply loose bar. Come to the side, perpendicular, insert a loose bar, grab the chin, and pull him straight down backward toward his back. And then there are some things you can do from there to keep him on his back. If he happens to sit out, and you are a snapback type guy, you like to do snapbacks, when he gets into a sit position, you use your double underhook grip, and you crawl backward on your knees and snap him down flat. And there's a whole series of moves that can be executed via the snapback, which we will show on film. If opponent going into a sit-out is the type of guy that's going to do a dip and turn, you can do reverse drag action. You can allow him to sit out, And when he dips and he turns in, you step up and you do reverse drag action on his arm. You pull his arm around and down. We'll show that one more time from a different angle. Opponent is in sit position. He slides his hips out, that is, he dips his hips, and he's going to turn in, step up, do reverse drag action on his arm, and go in behind him on the other side. Maintain control. If opponent is in sit position and you anticipated that he was going to go out into that position, you might be able to come to the side and apply what we call a quick pan, where you use back hook action and then you go across his chest and under his far armpit and bring him downward toward his back. That's quick pan action. So the basic is you get behind his arms, and if you can get a counter wrist grip, you get it. If you didn't want him out in a sit-out position to begin with, you could have gone for an ankle or hooked a leg. If you anticipate the sit-out coming, you might be able to come to the side, do loose bar, or you might be able to apply back hook action and do a quick pan, follow up to that back hook action. Or you can allow him into the sit position and use your double underhook, crawl backwards, snap him down flat, and then there's a whole series of moves that can be executed once you get him snapped flat. All right, we're going to work again. All right, versus rolls. One of the concerns when you're riding an opponent is that he'll work various rolls. First of all, versus far roll. If you're concerned about the far roll, one thing you always keep in mind is to ride ankles. This is why heavyweights are trained to ride ankles, because heavyweights that are on the bottom tend to work far rolls very well, and you can stop a roll, block it by grabbing an ankle. Well, ankle rides aside versus the roll, some other thoughts. If an opponent starts into a far roll, what you can do is sprawl the outside leg. Just sprawl that one leg way down low, and that'll prevent the roll, particularly if you loosen on the waist a little bit. If you can withdraw your arm around the waist a little bit as you sprawl, it makes it tougher for the opponent to go under you and bring you over him. Once you've done that, if the opponent persists in continuing down into roll, then you can apply a half Nelson and circle toward the head and get away from his hips, and you put him on his back. So sprawl of one leg, followed perhaps by a half Nelson and a circling action toward the head, can counter far roll. Some re-roll counters to the far roll. One thing you can do is as he grabs wrist, you grab wrist. You can counter wrist grip. When he goes down into the roll, you go with him. Just use the momentum and re-roll. Some people, instead of grabbing counter wrist grip to do the re-roll, will reach in from the rear crotch. They'll get rear crotch grip and apply re-roll action. They just go with the roll and get back into a riding position. So re-rolls can be effective. If you anticipate a roll early enough, you might be able to step around all the way to the other side, avoiding elevators as you go, and get in a perpendicular position on that other side. If the opponent goes down toward his hip, as he probably will, forcefully trying that roll, you would then either grab the bottom ankle if it's exposed, or wrap on the top leg. And that'll prevent opponent from sitting away and moving into another type of an escape or reversal move. Again, if you anticipate a far roll and you happen to be a crab ride expert, what you can do is shift to the rear of opponent in anticipation of his roll, get counter wrist grip as you proceed to the rear, and get in a hover position, one knee on each of his hips, and then just allow the far roll. When he goes into it, you sit him into crab ride, and then you work from crab ride. So crab ride is a very effective move against far roll action. And again, for people good with their legs, if you're a grapevine man, as opponent goes down into a far roll, you shift your body diagonally forward toward his far shoulder so that you can easily insert your leg drape on. Once you get your leg in, then you want to get a cross-face action going to bring him into a position underneath you where you can get your hips up on top. If it's hard to use cross-face, you can use reverse cross-face, where you bring the back of your upper arm alongside the back and side of his head, bring him across your body, make a fist, put it up into his rear crotch area, and pull yourself up on top. So if you shift diagonally up into opponent's far shoulder, that will facilitate insertion of the grape. Once you've got the grape inserted, you want to apply either cross-face action or reverse cross-face action to get yourself into a position where your hips are higher than his. And that's the basic rule when you have a grapevine. You tend to keep your hips higher than the opponent's hips, so you cannot reverse you to your back. All right, we've taken care of far roll blocks and counters, and now we're going to work against wrist leg roll, which is a variation of far roll. Number one, when you're on top, you keep your legs free. Unless you're using your legs for some good purpose, you keep them free. Don't let opponent grab a hold of them. If opponent reaches for a leg, you stretch it before he gets a good bite. It's that simple. Now, if opponent happens to have wrist leg roll grip, and you anticipate the wrist leg roll coming, just as opponent starts into the far roll action, you execute a high leg over movement with a tied leg, and upon completing the high leg over, you immediately hip hoist the free leg and then sit the tied leg through, ideally around opponent's head. As the sit through takes place, slip your free hand underneath opponent's near arm and proceed toward the modified screamer. One more time. When opponent goes down into the far roll action, do a little high leg over with your tied leg, and then you immediately hip hoist the free leg and sit the tied leg through toward the front, ideally around his head. And as the sit through takes place, slip your free arm, hand that is, underneath the opponent's near arm and proceed toward a modified screamer. Now against Granby roll. Granby roll. If it were all so easy to stop, it would not be considered so potent. To compound the difficulty in defending, Granby has some complementary moves, particularly far roll and high turn-in, that are pretty potent also. If opponent really excels at Granby, rather than give 4 or 5 points, consider giving the opponent a neutral. Let up, take down, in other words, and whip him on his feet. If you're concerned about Granby and you care to ride him, you may want to hook an ankle, hook a leg that is, or grab an ankle. Keep opponent from getting to a set-up position. You control his legs. If you feel threatened by the potential of opponent's Granby, tend to go behind his arms at the whistle. As soon as the ref blows the whistle, get behind that near arm so that you'll be in good position to gain counter wrist grip, which should enable you to tilt opponent away from the direction you care to head. If you don't want to grab counter wrist grip, you just want to keep an underhook, you can still crank with that underhook and lift them in the opposite direction from the way you care to head. Particularly if you're able to get behind or under opponent's near arm, but you're without the time or desire to resist his Granby, simply go with him. Perform a cartwheel action and do it almost simultaneous to his Granby, and that'll put you in control position on the other side. One more time. If opponent is going to go into a Granby and you care to go with him, what you do is you post your forehead and you do a cartwheel, and it'll put you into control position on the other side. All right, we've mentioned some things you can do against far roll, against wrist leg roll, against Granby roll, and now we'll address near side roll. First, don't ask for it. When you're at opponent's side rear rather than perpendicular, don't reach either for forearm or half Nelson. You're only making yourself vulnerable to a near roll action. You feel a need for either forearm or half Nelson, you come perpendicular before inserting your arm under his body or inserting the half Nelson. Ankle rides, of course, will make it next to impossible for an opponent to near roll you, or far roll you, or Granby roll you, or wrist leg roll you. So grabbing an ankle can be wise if you're up against somebody who does a lot of rolls. Balance. If at all possible, maintain your base. The further you are from your back, the safer you be. Therefore, make every effort to stay on your knees. Sustain your base by bracing properly. Number 1, widen your knee spread. Number 2, come perpendicular. Get your forward knee around to the front sufficiently. And number 3, have your knees not under him, but sufficiently far away from the opponent. If you're very adept at crab ride and care to do so, you can invite and allow opponent to initiate near roll. But slip a knee alongside or under his near hip, and then put him in crab ride in the proper way. If crab ride is not possible or not desired, and if balance cannot be maintained versus the near roll effort, lock the step over part. As you are falling toward your hip, reposition the waist strap arm by putting it around his near hamstring, and also raise the knee and foot of your bent top leg. Don't let him step across you. Make certain that all the while you're on your hip, your arm up through the rear crotch and your raised leg, continue to block his step over. While on your hip, make sure you don't pin yourself. Try to shift away and recover your base without going across your back. Or if you're down on your hip and you're finding it difficult to shift away and recover base, and you're near to being pinned, re-roll him and rise to your base. Now, anytime you're down on your hip blocking that step over, particularly if you had reached for forearm, you may be able to draw that forearm down in under him enough that you'll be able to get fishhook grip. And if you can get fishhook grip, shifting away to recover base or re-rolling to recover base will be incredibly easy. You'll have no difficulty in doing either. Now, if opponent does a near side roll, and you care to re-roll him right at the outset, you have to anticipate the follow-up moves. As you re-roll him, when he near roll, and in anticipation of the follow-up moves, as the man near rolls you, and you go into your re-roll action, his next move, upon being re-rolled, will be to rise and reach for a switch. So you have to stretch your target leg so he cannot get his switch grip on your leg. Then his next move will be to go to a one-point switch. We call it switch to whizzer. He'll be bringing his arm over your back, eventually over your head, and he'll be hip hoisting to his base. As he brings his arm over your back, you do duck under action to prevent him getting his arm over your head. As you rise with your head, his next move will be to grab a lat and upper arm and do PB, which is a pancake type action. And as he brings you down, you should try to rotate his hips into you and get crab ride type position. One more time. All right, near roll. If you anticipate the near roll and care to re-roll rather than do anything else possible, as you re-roll, you have to anticipate his follow-up moves. He'll sit up and reach for a switch, so you have to stretch the target leg. Once you've cleared your leg, his next move would be to change to whizzer. So he's going to try to bring his arm over your back and head and hip hoist the base. But as he does that, you do duck under action. As you're rising for the duck under, his next move will be to grab lat and upper arm and do PB, pancake type action. And you would have to anticipate that and rotate him into a sitting position and get him in crab ride, which wouldn't all be so easy. If he had a good lat grip and a good upper arm grip, he'd be able to whip you down off your base into a PB pin grip, and you'd have to establish your crab ride to the extent that you could and try to keep one shoulder up off the mat so you don't get yourself pinned. Ideally, you don't leave your base. You don't allow the PB. All right, we're going to work against whizzer used as an escape. So our interest is to try to maintain control. not to fight off a takedown attempt, but to try to keep our ride position, our control position on top. Number one, you want to know how to block a whizzer from coming in. If you have leg hook ride, for example, the opponent might want to apply a whizzer to get out of that leg hook. So you control the near arm. If you control the near arm, he can't windmill his arm back to get the whizzer in. Or if the arm is free, you put your head across his back, and then when he comes back to get the whizzer, your head's in the way. So he can't get the whizzer in. If the arm's free and your head's not across the back, and he windmills the whizzer in, like so, and now he takes it out again, and he's coming back to put it in, you go down and get far ankle. Before he gets it good, you get far ankle, and with that grip, you'd be able to pick up on it and drive into him on an angle and control him still. Or if you can't get far ankle, you wrap around the near hamstring. You wrap around that hamstring low, his whizzer is less effective even if he gets it in. Or, if he comes back for a whizzer, you can move your hand up toward the shoulder. Rather than go downward with it, you come upward with it. And again, he doesn't have the kind of leverage he's really seeking, even if he gets a little bit of a whizzer grip on you. He doesn't have a sufficient whizzer grip to be very effective. Now, if he gets a good whizzer in, and as you have a waist strap and he's able to apply a good whizzer, some of the things you can do. One, you want to work around behind him and perhaps get a crotch lock. If you can get that crotch lock, and we're only going to simulate the follow-up, you could do a crotch lock roll-through and come out on top, perhaps even be able to get Navy ride, which is a pin lead-up. If it's feasible, if you can do it, you can tilt your hip a little bit and work further around to the rear, get your knees between his legs, spread your knees to imbalance him a bit, and then pick up on an ankle and then drive forward on an angle and break him down. And as you break him down, he may become vulnerable to deep false air. You may have to clear by stepping bottom leg first and then top leg to after deep false air to put him on the back. Now, if he has a whizzer in and you happen not to have a leg hook, you're clear to the side, that's when you can start to come around perpendicular and get far on. And you'd swing him around in front of you and put him on his back. Or if not far arm, deep false air. Go up for half Nelson type grip. And again, you'd swing him around in front and put him on his back. Or, if you can get it, double trouble. You know, you go up over the head and lock hands underneath the armpit. And again, swing him around in front and put him on his back. If he has the leg hook, his most common move to get out to the front and get his neutral position, get his escape, would be to drill, and tilt his hip into you and eventually slide his leg through. And at that juncture, if you time it right, you do what we call dump with the head. You bring your head around into his chest area and dump him down, and you would still have top position. You'd have your control position. So once again, we're talking about merely stopping the escape, either blocking it or countering it in some way. All the other whizzer counters, and there are some others, are applicable, but probably not as good as the ones we just showed because you're less apt to be able to maintain control with them. Yes, you might be able to do a far grip and get wrist control on the wrist that's part of that whizzer and put him on his back. Yes, you might be able to hook the leg and do limp arm. It's possible, but probably what we just showed would be plenty sufficient to maintain control. All right, we're going to work against various wrist controls. The bottom man commonly will grab wrist, either on a whistle or on the stand-up movement or on the sit-out movement. He'll go for the wrist. And we train the man on top to counter wrist grip. We tell him when he grabs, you grab. If he grabs your wrist, you counter grab his wrist. Now, that's what we would do if we were on top. If we were the bottom man and we grabbed wrists and the other man came in and grabbed our wrists, We might block it by keeping our elbow tight to our ribs so he couldn't get in there to get that counter wrist grip. But if he were to get inside, either because we allowed him or he was too quick, slick to be prevented from doing it, then our movement is a far roll to a slip and a half to a pin grip. So we initiate far roll action, and then we grab the opponent's upper arm, we put his half Nelson in for him, and then we just slip that half and do a hip hoist, post our knee, and put him on his back. One more time. If the man on top does a counter wrist grip, our counter to that counter wrist grip is far roll action, and we grab the upper arm, put his half Nelson in, slip it in other words, and then hip hoist and put him on his back. And the top man also might go for what we call wrist back. And if we want to prevent him from getting it, we bend the near elbow. If you keep your near elbow slightly bent, doesn't have to be all the way down on the mat, just slightly bent, then he can't get wrist back. However, if he gets it, what we want to do is bring a foot up in place of that hand brace that we had, that arm that was out posted. We now post a leg, foot. And then we rise all the way up and we rip fingers legally. 4 fingers, step away, disengage, and turn inward and get a neutral. Second move against wrist back when you're kneeling is if he gets the wrist back, you can do a flip. But you have to make sure you rotate inward toward him after you flip so you don't get trapped on your back. You swish your feet, flip, and then rotate in toward him, and you'll get a neutral. Now, if he gets wrist back and is able to break you down prone or on your hip, on your side, then we do what we call butt up. We raise our butt in the air and then move laterally into him to expose our hands so we can lock fingers and swing our hand to the front. We'll do that one more time at a slightly different angle. If he gets wrist back and he breaks us down to our hip, and we're concerned about getting put in a Sullivan or what they call pipe wrench, Sullivan ride, which is actually a pin grip, then what we would do is butt up, raise our butt off the mat, hip laterally into the opponent to expose our hand where we could reach down and grab that hand, lock fingers, and swing our arms to the front, and then rise to base and continue to wrestle. Now, reach around wrist grip. If the opponent on the whistle, as commonly happens, sweeps your arm in and gets a wrist, you want to prevent that. So to prevent it, number one, you use shoulder strength and concentration to prevent the man from sweeping your arm in. When he goes to sweep it in, you just resist it. You don't let it happen. If he gets that arm swept in and he gets the wrist, immediately roll inside, up over his forearm and wrist, and free your arm. One more time. If he gets reach around wrist grip, before he binds it to your body, traps it against your body, raise your hand up inside and roll it over his forearm or wrist and free your arm. Now if he gets reach around wrist grip, another possibility, if he doesn't have too tight a grip to you, if he's not bodied tight to you, he's not brought his body in tight to you, you can do a pivoting. You pivot, you duck your head down, pivot, 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 and come out the side door and go behind him. If he gets reach around wrist grip and pulls you off your base, puts his knee against your lower leg and pulls you laterally, then you can do what we call a crawl. You make like a bicep, you go under his arm, and you just pivot on your shoulder and come out that side door, do a little drag action, get behind him. If he gets reach around wrist grip and he circles to the other side and goes after fish hook, once he gets that fish hook, which is a potent grip, what you want to do is try to sit. If you can sit, then you'll be able to yank your arm up or walk your fingers up your body and free your arm. And then you will just continue to wrestle do whatever you have to get your move for a reversal. If he gets fish hook and breaks you down, then what you might do is weld your legs together, bring your legs tight to one another, so that the opponent, as you walk your fingers away from him, cannot reach deeper with his grip to follow your wrist and maintain his grip on that wrist. Okay. Face Northfield. We'll do that one more time. If he circles to the other side with his reach around wrist grip, and he reaches in from the rear and gets fish hook, you bring your legs together, weld them, and then walk your fingers away from his grip, and the weld on his wrist will keep him from deepening his arm up through the rear crotch to follow your wrist and maintain his grip. All right, some other common grips that the top man might apply to a wrist. He might reach under and get what we call far wrist. If he does that, you just roll your hand inside up over his forearm and wrist and free. You roll against his thumb, so to speak, and you free your wrist. If we had our elbows posted on the mat and he were to try to reach in to get a near one-on-one, near wrist grip, what we do is keep our forearms parallel, perhaps even slightly divergent, so the opponent cannot get a one-on-one. If our hands are pointed inward toward one another, then the opponent can get a one-on-one. And if he does, then you have to be able to free it. And you bring your hand out to the side, turn palm up, and make a bicep. Free the wrist. If he has two hands on the one wrist, he has what we call a two-on-one wrist grip, then a couple of thoughts there. One, you might peel the fingers or do the Mattia knuckle crunch, where you get the tips of the fingers and crunch the upper finger back into the lower finger and put a lot of painful pressure on him to make him want to release the grip that he had. And then you'd wrestle from there. You'd move out. You'd have to free your arm from the one-on-one. That knuckle crunch can be used against the one-on-one. If an opponent has only a one-on-one, you can, with your free hand, reach across and get the tips of the fingers and crunch those forward knuckles, drive those bones back into the bones behind them, and create a lot of pain and free your wrist completely. If an opponent has a two-on-one and you care not to peel fingers in a legal manner or crunch the fingers, then what you can do is with your free arm, pry off the outside wrist grip, the far wrist grip. You pry his arm to the outside and then free your other arm the way you normally would. If you happen to be up on your feet, you're up on your feet and the opponent has you have a wrist grip and the opponent is looking to get in and get counter wrist grip. What you can do is parry. That is, use your inside arm to block him from getting the counter wrist grip. If he tries to come over top, raise your elbow up. If he tries to go inside, you bring your elbow back tight to your wrist. Now, if he happens to get inside and he gets counter wrist grip, then what you can do is release the wrist grip you have, thrust your arm across your own body, get his wrist with your free hand, roll against the thumb and get what we call an Oki 2-on-1 wrist grip, and then walk your feet a little bit and do a vertical hip hoist, cut through, and you get your neutral. One more time. If the opponent manages to counter wrist grip against the standing wrist grip, what you would do is let go of the wrist you have, thrust your tied arm all the way across your body, reach down with your free hand and your wrist, roll against the thumb, get a 2-on-1, Oki 2-on-1, and do a basic cut through to get a neutral. Now back down on the mat. If an opponent has a one-on-one and you're prone on the mat, first of all, you shouldn't have allowed it. Your forearm should have been parallel or divergent to prevent him getting a one-on-one. If he gets it and he's already started to pull it under your body, whereby you wouldn't be able to free it out to the side as shown earlier, he's going to try to do what's called pull the wrist out. And there are some pin grips that he can work from that, pull the wrist out, that you wouldn't want to get caught in. So you try to prevent the wrist from being pulled out by attaching your hand to your body. You cannot grab cloth, it's illegal, but you can apply friction by attaching your hand to your body. And what you might be able to do, catching him off balance as he does his high leg over to pull the wrist out, is you might be able to butt up and step across it and catch him. We're going to turn to some pins on our Wednesday schedule here. And the first pin that we'll talk about is double bar pry. Now, there are a couple of ways of getting the double bar grip. There are probably more than a couple, but a couple that we'll show are these. One, if you have a tight bar on the near arm, and the other man he's prone on his stomach, and he lets his other arm go limp. He's not concentrating there, he's not resisting there. You can just simply reach, get the crook of his arm, and sweep his arm back and lock your fingers so that you have the double bar grip. Another way to get the double bar grip is if you have a one-on-one on that far arm, you can jump to the other side, stay parallel to him, pull his wrist down alongside his hip, post your head against his upper arm, release the wrist grip and roll your hand over his arm, pressing downward on it to keep it trapped, and then complete your double bar grip on his arms. Now once you get double bar, if he's turned away from you, you won't be able to run the near side legally. So you'd have to jump across to the other side and run from that other side. And you keep it locked tight, you go slow, and you work toward the head, circling toward the head until you get in a straddle position and get him turned over on his back. And then ease him down. If as you're bringing him over, you care to, you can simply go up and put a figure 4 head scissors on his head. You put your heel on the other side of his head as if you were inserting a half Nelson almost. And then you have to make sure that the figure 4 on the head is legal. Your instep has to be behind your knee, and if you raise your heel up, the referee can see clearly that it is a legal figure 4 head scissors. And then you would raise your head up a little bit and push your hips downward a little bit to try to get his shoulders down and get him pinned. And that's double bar pin grip. Now another type of pin grip would be double trouble. We have simulated it earlier on the film. I don't know if we have completed it. Perhaps we have, but we'll do it again. If an opponent has a whizzer on you, one time that you can apply double trouble is against the whizzer. You come perpendicular, come up over his head, you lock fingers underneath his far armpit and swing him around in front of you. It's a great control grip. He'll have much trouble freeing himself, and you just ease him down and get your pin. Double trouble. A couple other double grips that lead to pin perhaps, or at least a near fall, is if an opponent has penetrated on you and somehow or another, either by design or by chance, you've got a double under grip, and he's come in for you, perhaps a double leg drop. If he has a double under grip and you find this to your liking, you can simply use that grip to turn him to his back and then trap him there. Or if you've sprawled on him and you're in overhook freeze type position, you have a whizzer on one side and a tricep grip on the other, you might apply our basic pan, and that would be what we prefer. If you had the regular pan grip, then you would dump him with your pan. You'd be under his face, under his chest, and you'd be rotating to his back. And that would be the ideal. But sometimes when you go to do the pancake, the man's head slips down, and his head is out of that pan. Your arm's not under his face, and yet you still have the leverage to turn him to his back. If that were to be the case, you could dump him, and as soon as you dump him, you sit through a little bit, and then you get a double under. You take your overhook arm and release and go inside and walk your fingers slowly toward one another, and you'll create excruciating pain. So you have to be careful, because even though the opponent might want to pin himself,
Okay.
Even though the opponent might want to pin himself, he's in such pain, he perhaps can't get his second shoulder down. So you have to be very careful. You'll at least get the near fall. You'll create a little respect for yourself and that other man, perhaps, with the amount of pain you'll be able to create, but don't tear him up entirely. All right? Also on this list of pin grips for this day, loose bar. If the opponent has sat out, for example, and you've come to the side and you've grabbed chin and you've inserted a bar, you can pull him straight down to his back and you can stay right with that grip, loose bar and chin. However, if he bridges, what you can also do is lock fingers up over top his forearm. Your arm around the neck deepens, your arm under the back deepens, and you lock fingers. And once you get your fingers locked, you can sprawl down as low as you want. You do not have to stay on your knees as you would with loose bar and chin. Loose bar and chin, you stay up on your knees just in case he's able to get out of it. Here, he's not getting out of it. He's trapped in what we call double bar lock. And then we have our crab ride pins, which previously have been done on film, so we'll go through them rather quickly. If you put him in a crab ride and he posts his two hands as you pull him back into you, you can get the crooks of his arms, use one foot to elevate him, and tip him up into a stack position, and then sit through, and you'll have him trapped in a streamer type grip. Or if you have them in crab ride and you're able to get a one-on-one and a half Nelson, what you can do is elevate him off you, and as you elevate him off, you post your head, jump to the other side, and you'll have him on his back in a good solid pin grip, wrist bar in half. Or if you have wrist bar in half while you have the crab ride, and as you elevate him off and start to apply that half, he starts to slip it. You can elevate him all the way across to the other side and go after screaming. You have to elevate him high, get him up into a stack position, sit through, trap his two arms behind him, and ease him down. And then the fourth pin from crab ride that we showed earlier on film is if you have him in crab ride, and you get a tight bar on his arm, and you elevate him off to the side, tight bar and maybe a one-on-one on the other side, you elevate him off to the side, then what you can do, come to your knees, Mike, is you can run the head and put him on his back with wrist bar and tight bar combo. That rotating to the front, that arcing to the front, we call flying him over with the tight bar and the wrist bar. Now we're going to do snapback series against a sit-out. If the opponent gets in a sit-out, there's a series of moves that can be executed off snapback action. Now to get more leverage for snapping the opponent back, we want the underhook hand that is on the side where your own head is to clasp the opponent's upper arm, not his shoulder. On the other side, the best you'll be able to get probably is the shoulder. And you try to catch him when he's leaning backward a little bit, or you stimulate him to lean back by driving him forward. Either way, when you do snap him back, you go smooth, not hard, because you don't want to alarm him, and thereby cause him to perhaps forcefully rotate off his back. You want to snap him in a more casual way, but snap him flatter than flat. You want him as low down on the mat as you can get him, and you have to fall backward a bit to create the space. That's what you would want. Back up. We won't sprawl. We stay on our knees, though, when we bring him down back. All right. If the opponent reaches up to grab the head, that's a signal to snap him. And with that good grip that we had on his bicep, tricep area, he won't be able to get a good bite, good grip on the head. So we crawl back, we snap him down flatter than flat, and then as he tries to rotate out, because he can't rotate in, your head's in the way, we do a little bit of duck under action, and we circle his head, and we'll end up having a half Nelson and inside crotch grip. and that'll put him on his back. So if he goes for the head, the signal then is given to you, and you snap him flat as you can get him, and then do little duck under action, circle the head, put him on his back. Now if he reaches for the head and you snap him down, get him pretty flat, and he starts to rotate out, and he's strong enough to rotate to his knees, you come around perpendicular, and you look for double trouble grip. It could appear, and if ever double trouble avails itself, you take it. It's a great grip to get on the opponent. On a snapback, if the opponent has not grabbed the head, and you have your double underhook, and he's leaned back that little bit, all you have to do is crawl backwards, snap him flat, and then release with one hand, push his head down out of your way so you can circle the head, and you start, as he rotates out, you start to push down on the head and circle, and then you grab his fingers. You lift those fingers in the air so you can insert your hand and arm to get two upper arms pin grip. Facing a different direction for that one. On the pure snapback, where you're using your double underhook, he hasn't reached for the head. You're just snapping him down flat. As he rotates out, you slow down his rotation. Don't let him rotate past his hip. You push his head down out of the way. His hand will be in pretty close to his chest if he's smart. And as you circle, you'll grab his fingers, pick them up in the air, thrust your hand and arm inside his arm, and get standard two upper arms, tie up as a pin grip. Now if you snap him flat and he rotates out and he's strong enough to get to his knees, which is what he'd like to do, and the best you can do is slow him down and keep his head posted by pressing downward with your forearm and elbow. Then you would circle to a perpendicular position, grab his knee, sweep it out and up, and step in for a turn. All right, if an opponent is in sit out and he's a pretty powerful kid, and you're concerned about his rotation, instead of using a double underhook to snap him, you can drive up into him. When he presses back, you release with one hand and grab a chin. And once you've snapped him back, you try to arrest his motion and then come over the top with one arm, over the top with the other arm, lock your fingers, and you get what we call inverted reverse headlock. So those are our moves from snapback. Now, from wrist bar and half. If you have wrist bar and half, one move is to post his head, get low, and then pry him over. Run the head a little bit. Try to get chest on chest as much as you can and pin him. Very, very potent grip, wrist bar and half. If you have wrist bar and half, and it's hard to pry him, he's very resistant to that, you can put your near knee in front of his near knee and spiral him. Swing him around in front of you and get low, chest on chest, and put him on his back. If he tilts his hip into you, kind of sits away a little bit, it'll be tough to pry him over, it'll be tough to spiral. And then what you do is you release with both hands and you change off to a snapback. You fall backward and snap him, and then work your snapback series. If you have wrist bar in hand, and he happens to stand up, you might keep that wrist bar in half and do a near leg sweep back and spiral him and put him on his back. Just ease him down so you don't go over. Now if you have him one-on-one and he's on his stomach, some of the moves from there. Basic old move is to do a high leg over, pull his wrist down alongside him and up in the air, and then thrust your hand followed by your arm inside his arm, switch hips, drive into him, crowd him, and get two upper arms pin grip. Once more, facing a different direction. If you're with a single one-on-one, you can pull that wrist out to the side, alongside him, do a high leg over, pick his hand up in the air, trying to keep his arm straight, thrust your hand and arm inside his arm, switch hips, crowd him, and go after standard two upper arms pin grip. If ever you're pulling that wrist out and it won't come out, You reach in with two hands. You get your second hand on it, and with two hands you yank that wrist out and put it up on his back, and then you can get what we call zoom. You just thrust your arms forward and drive him, rotate him, crowd him over to his back. And then catch as catch can. You can stay with that grip for a bit or change off the reverse Nelson or some such. If as you try to pull the wrist out, he binds his hand to his body, and again you can't get it out, you use two hands to rip it out, put his hand behind his back in hammerlock position, keep a lot of weight into him, circle to the front, get an underhook. With that underhook grip, you get his wrist, and you keep circling until you get to the other side and get a chin. And once you get the chin, you get low and rotate him over without doing it too violently, where the ref would step in and prevent what you're doing. We'll do that one more time from a different angle. Going for a wrist pull out. He won't let you pull it out. You reach in with two hands, put him in hammerlock position, weight on him, circle to the front, underhook, get his wrist with your other hand now, continue to circle, get chin, and then ease him over to his back, and you'll have him on his back for the pin.